Alrighty, I'm having something that sort of resembles lunch at about 3 o'clock here. Um, Time for a bit of financial news. God, what a flippin' circus it's been so far this year. A little while back I sort of said that Fitch, which is an analysis mob in the USA, I don't know if they're involved in ratings or that as well. I think they might have a ratings agency bit as well. They said that there's likely to be a property collapse in China around 2016. Well, China's growth has slowed up to 7.4%, which is the slowest it's been since 1990. Yeah, I sort of feared that this might happen in a way. Let me tell you a few things with old China. They've got all-powerful businessmen there. They've got blokes there who, have held up cops at gunpoint and got away with it and only actually been arrested for it 10 years after the fact. There's so many people with so much corruption going on, and a lot of the wealth just goes to a handful of people with political connections and all that sort of stuff. As you know, China has produced so much stuff. They've ran most Western businesses into the ground, or at least put people in the manufacturing sector in the West out of a job to a large degree. Not totally, not with everything, but, And then as a result, when people are out of a job, well, they don't have much money in their pockets and therefore they don't buy a lot of shit, because you've got to be a producer to then be a consumer. This whole idea of the consumer likes it like this and da-da-da-da-da, well, you've got to sort of be both, or at least have close enough connections. As in, you might be a consumer as a woman, but it's your husband that is the producer. You know what I mean? Trouble is, they've had, a lot of production, and everybody's bought all this cheap crap, and now at the end of the day, people have overborrowed, and now a lot of the manufacturing is over there. There's not as many jobs, simple jobs in the West, not in the manufacturing sector. That's basically a dead sector. And the big trouble with all this is, it's all fine if the Chinese spent all this money, but they don't spend it all. They've got a tendency to save it all up. And Ben Bernanke talked about all this. He referred to it as the savings glut in China. In other words, the money has gone out of the US and other Western countries, Europe and that, over to China. They've saved it all or invested it all in, American debt and whatnot. Which has meant more people end up buying all this crap on their credit cards. And at the end of the day, China itself was only pretty much exporting stuff, and they weren't consuming because these workers are on such piss poor wages. There's been guys who have been building televisions at 100 miles an hour all day long since 2002. Guess what? They can't even afford a television themselves. This is the trouble. They produce a lot of stuff in China, but they don't consume to the same degree they produce, and they save up a lot of what they get. And as a result, they've flooded the world with all these exports, but now that the world's full of all this Chinese rubbish, there's no one more to buy it off them, because the Chinese worker, the average Chinese man on the street, doesn't have enough money to buy his own Chinese-made crap. And this has been a problem that they knew about, and the government was trying to do something about by encouraging city living, which encouraged consumption and whatnot. And, America and multiple other governments warned them that they were too reliant on their exports, and it's right. And they reckon things are going to change. Things are changing already. It's the slowest growth they've had since 1990. And I can remember the first cheap power tools hitting Australia in December 2002. Basically, they also say that China's population is aging very quick, and a lot of people within the next 15 years over there are going to be too old to work, and within 20 years China's going to have some real issues just trying to hold up all the old people. The fact of the matter is, Chinese government being the Chinese government, they're just likely to cut the pension to almost nothing. They're likely to pull the rope from under the people, which they're pretty good at doing, which is why Chinese are such obsessive savers, because they're used to having government promises broken all the time. But anyway, let's go on with the European scene. European scene's been friggin' laughable. Oh, isn't it glorious? I'll talk first about the Swiss. In Switzerland, as one Swiss girl my uncle met pronounced it, in Switzerland, they had a gold initiative, and that was, over there it's direct democracy. It's not like the glorious democracy in Australia where you put someone, you vote for some dickhead who's promising everything, and then when the bloke gets into power, he's just like, does his own shit, and it doesn't matter what you say. It just sort of, he's got to stick to the party line, and if the party line says that you're going to get a toxic waste up the road from you, which was one of the things they were trying to do not terribly far from where I am, then he's just got to stick with the party line. Same with the bloody wind turbines up near where I had my other property. The party line is that they're fine, and so we just put our fingers in our ears when all the locals are complaining about feeling motion sickness from infrasound, which they've recently had another study I read in this week's paper that shows that yes, infrasound does make you sick, and a lot of people knew this sort of crap, who played around with low-frequency experiments, especially US government low-frequency experiments on human subjects. Bit of CIA fandangles and stuff. They knew it made people sick, and now they're finding it out once again from wind turbines due to vibrations probably caused by shitty manufacture of these wind turbines. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Anyway, so the Swiss have a different system. They call it direct democracy, where basically if there's any big issues, there may be something like 18 different things. It all varies, it can be anything from 12 to 20-something things a year that the average man on the street will actually go to the polls about to vote on these issues. And one of them that come up was, we've got less than 20% of our reserve bank reserves as gold. We want to raise that to 40%. Should we do it? Should we not? 1/3 said yes, 2/3 said no at the end of the day. So that didn't go through. Now, what originally happened back in 2008 was, because of all these bailouts and Greece and what they call the pigs, which is Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece and Spain, which are all needing, they're in serious trouble financially. They've had a lot of bailouts and that. After all that, people tried to flee the euro by selling the euros for Swiss franc because it was a more stable currency. And the trouble with that was in 2008, there was basically a shortage of Swiss franc to the point the locals had a shortage of money. So what they done was, to fix the problem, they put a peg to the euro, and it's something like, what is it, 1.2 Swiss franc to the euro, or 1.2 euro to the Swiss franc, or some crap, and they maintain that peg. Now, after the gold initiative, they said, the ECB and a number of others, European Central Bank, a number of others were saying, well, you're still going to hold this peg. Yeah, we're going to maintain the peg. They said to the World Bank, to the International Monetary Fund, and the European Central Bank, which is the central bank for the European Union, yes, we are going to keep the peg, keep this solid exchange rate, basically. It wasn't float with the markets where the US dollar and the Aussie dollar go up and down against each other. this was a solid peg that they used to do, you know, back in the 80s and back in Margaret Thatcher's day and stuff like that, amongst Europe. Now, between the separate currencies of the European Union, before in '98 they decided to have the euro as an actual currency, and they said we're going to hold this peg with the euro and it's all going to be fine. 1 week after they said that to the World Bank, the IMF and the ECB, they pulled the plug on it a week later, which is something like about 6 or 8 weeks after the gold initiative. Anyways, in the space of about 2.5 days, it gained about 20% of its value. It rose about 20% of its value. Now, you've got to realise that only a couple of days prior, they announced a $1 trillion bailout for the Eurozone. They're like quantitative easing. We're going to just pour in another €1 trillion, further watering down the value of the euro currency. And then, you know, on top of that, well, this hard left dude got in Greece and said that we want to be forgiven half of our debt and all this sort of stuff, and we'll see them all squabble and cause a shitstorm over that and see where they go, and it's all the bankers are the enemies, but, oh God, it's just everyone's riddled in debt there. I have been told that Greece has literally 7-fold the amount of government employees per capita than any of the other EU nations. That means that, say over here, for every 100 people, we've got like 1 or 2, probably 2, government employees for every 100 other people. And, you know, they may have a slightly higher ratio. It could be 4 or something, 4 or 5 or whatever in Europe. Greece has 7-fold what Germany or France or any of these other countries have in terms of government employees. But anyway, you know, after all that, well, then the euro dropped another 10 or 11% in value in basically about 2.5, 3 hours after they come out with the Greek election results. Oh, it's all glorious fun over there, you know. Somehow the US dollar's going good. I don't really believe how or why or what sort of manipulation's going on there. Seeing that the debt level now, they reckon, is about $18 trillion. You know, and the obligations over the next 10 years, which are primarily Medicaid for pensioners and the payment of pensions, which, by the way, in the States are far, far higher than the pensions here. They've got about $108 to $120 trillion of obligations over the next 10 years. It's all a circus. We'll see what happens. On that note, silver has been the highest I've seen since I've been involved in it, and I've been involved in it. I found a little video since July 2014. I've been involved in silver. It's the highest I've seen it, and I was completely correct. The market is doing what I would have expected it to do. When there's panic on the street, when everybody's going broke or whatever, when everything's looking very shaky, you know, everyone sort of runs to precious metals. Gold is actually doing the best I've seen it too. I've seen it per kilogram going from, what was it, 44,500 Aussie dollars. I could buy a kilo bar of gold, which is a freaking big bar, and you're now looking at about 53.5 or 55. I think it's $55,000 for a kilo of gold at the moment. But basically, I've seen the gold go from around the price I can buy it at. I'm not talking about spot price, about $1,350 an ounce Aussie, like $1,350 Australian an ounce, and we're now travelling around $1,600 an ounce. Buyback price and spot price are the same thing, which is a bit lower, but let's just put it like this. On paper, I've gained a few $1,000s in my stash alone. You know, and if it all turns to shit big time, I might just go and pay off the mortgage in this place like that, you know, if it really turns to hell with silver alone. But yeah, I will see. But I wouldn't be terribly surprised if, you know, it's looking pretty bad by the middle of 2015, and then the chooks come home to roost at the end of 2015, start of 2016. My theory usually is that when they say it's going to crash, it's sort of, there's too many people trying to keep the status quo, trying to keep the ball rolling, and it sort of drags on for a couple of years. This time I'm wrong. This time it's all sort of happening a bit quicker than even the professional analysts were thinking it was going to happen. But they still might be on track for 2016, but I mean, for, you know, things really falling to bits, because it seems it takes a while for the wheels to fall off. When the GFC hit the States, it sort of started to happen there. Then when it got really bad in the States, it was still another 12 weeks before we had any effect over here, and it sort of hit the banks here. So with some things you can smell it on the wind. Other things you don't find out until after the fact, such as the Greek election, such as the Swiss pulling the peg from the euro. And the big worry is with things in the future, if you didn't know why Chinese stuff is so cheap, the Chinese renminbi or yuan is pegged to the US dollar, and all they got to do is do a Switzerland, and people are seriously worried that China may do a Switzerland and pull the plug, or pull the peg, and therefore pull the plug on everything, and you'll wake up to things turn into shit big time if they pull the peg on the Chinese yuan being pegged to the US dollar. I have not really read up on what the ramifications of that could be. It actually could be a good thing for the States. But yeah, price of oil. I've never seen so many media people pissing and wailing and shitting on about the price of oil going down. It is cheaper here. Fuel at the pump is 10 cents a litre cheaper than it was in 2005. I shit you not. Regardless of the fact we've had quite a bit of inflation since the GFC and all that, which was obviously after 2005. I used to pay $1.12.9, $1.13.9. It was sort of around $1.13 I generally paid per litre for petrol here in Australia. It's $1.02. And, you know, I've seen one bloke, Alternative Media TV, which is just like a dude who does a lot of sort of conspiracy theory, alternative media sort of stuff. He's the only one I've seen which has said that the price of oil going down is a good thing. You got all these media people all crying a friggin' river that the price of oil has gone down. Well, cry me a river. You know, like, oh, but everybody's going to be this and that, and the workers are going to be up shit. What? I knew a bloke who was involved in the oil industry quite heavily, spent years in Libya, 7 or 8 years in Libya, years in Nigeria, the North Sea, which was one of his, well, he was British, so he spent a fair bit of time there, Queensland, Australia, and Saudi Arabia. Years and years and years in Saudi Arabia. And he wasn't on a great ton of dough. I know some people in Texas are, but he wasn't on a massive amount. But at the end of the day, when the oil price goes down, do you think it's the oil worker who gets his ass whooped? No. It's the friggin' multi-millionaire oil tycoon in Texas, in Saudi Arabia, and wherever else, you know. And at the end of the day, the man on the street gains, and you have some big friggin', you know, multi-millionaire Texan lose out. Ah, so what? Cry me a river. God blimey, who gives a shit, you know. But I think it's good. The Russian government obviously doesn't think it's good. May I remind you that the Russian government, I've heard two different figures, it has between 11% and 13% of its yearly GDP is its national debt. In other words, government debt in Russia isn't something like 150 or 160% the GDP as it is in the States. It's 11 or 13%. And that's really bloody low. And then the personal debt level, how's this for personal debt level? On average, for the average Russian civilian is $1,700. Imagine having only $1,700 debt to your name, your personal debt, not the government debt, your personal debt is $1,700, and your country's national GDP debt 11 to 13%. Russia's obviously lost a bit of dough with the sudden, where oil's gone less than half its value, but in the process, they have cut back their spending instead of just borrow more money. I don't know how many people lend them money, saying the Chinese ain't going too well, and everybody else has put sanctions on them. But anyway, yeah, I'm sort of, when they're all crying about the oil price going down, I feel like going, oh, get over it. What's it all cry about? But anyway, that's a little economic wrap-up. Next time.